As the 2024 election approaches, community organizations are already preparing for what they expect to be a worsening onslaught of disinformation targeting communities of color and immigrant communities. They say the tailored campaigns challenge assumptions of what kinds of voters are susceptible to election conspiracies and distrust in voting systems. And there's more background, really just a reminder. I know you're saying we were there, we remember, but the details, looking back, just stunning. Leading up to the 2020 election, Facebook ads targeting Latino and Asian American voters described Joe Biden as a communist. Local station claimed a Black Lives Matter co-founder practiced witchcraft. Doctored images showed dogs urinating on Donald Trump campaign posters, although none of these claims were true. They scorched through social media sites that advocates say have fueled election misinformation in communities of color. The AP, Associated Press, with the details here. Sarah Shaw, Director of Policy and Community Engagement at the advocacy group, Indian American Impact, which runs the fact-checking site, DesiFacts.org, says they're getting more complex, more sophisticated, and spreading like wildfire. She continued saying what we saw in 2020, unfortunately, will probably be fairly mild in comparison to what we will see in the months leading up to 2024. Jenny Liu, Miss Disinformation Policy Manager at the nonprofit Asian Americans Advancing Justice, says growing subset of communities of color, especially immigrants for whom English is not their first language, are questioning the integrity of US voting processes, subscribing to Trump's lies of a stolen 2020 election, and still these communities are largely left out of conversations about misinformation. Jenny Liu also says, when you think of the typical consumer of a conspiracy theory, you think of someone who's older, maybe from a rural area, maybe a white man, she said. You don't think of Chinese Americans scrolling through WeChat. That's why this narrative glosses over and erases a lot of the disinformation harms that many communities of color face. So deliberately constructing misinformation, in addition to general misinformation themes about voting machines, mail-in voting, groups are catering their messaging to communities of color, experts say. For example, immigrants from authoritarian regimes in countries like Venezuela, or who have lived through the Chinese Cultural Revolution, may be more vulnerable to misinformation, claiming politicians are wanting to turn the US into a socialist state, said Inga Travitt, head of research for the Propaganda Research Lab at the Center for Media Engagement at the University of Texas at Austin. Laura Zomer, co-founder of the Spanish language fact-checking group, Fachiquedo, sure I mispronounced it, but here's the drill. She says disinformation efforts often hinge on topics most important to each community, whether that is public safety, immigration, abortion, education, inflation, or alleged extramarital affairs. It takes advantage of their very real fear and trauma from their experiences in their home countries. Several misinformation experts told the Associated Press that other vulnerabilities include language barriers and a lack of knowledge of the US media landscape and how to find credible US news sources. Many immigrants rely on translated content for voting information, leaving space for bad actors to inject misinformation. Misinformation can also arise from mistranslations. The Brookings Institute, a nonprofit think tank, found examples of mistranslations in Colombian, Cuban, Venezuelan WhatsApp groups where progressive was translated to progresista, which carries far left connotations that are closer to the Spanish words socialista and comunista. Now, beliefs in disinformation, many of these efforts have surged as Asian American, Black, Latino communities have grown in political power, said Maria Teresa Kumar, founding president of the nonprofit advocacy group Voto Latino. She says disinformation is at its core meant to be a sort of voter suppression tactic for communities of color. It targets communities of color in a way that feeds into their already justifiable concerns that the system is stacked against them. And the tactics also feed into a history as old as the Jim Crow era of attempting to disenfranchise people of color, going back to voter intimidation, suppression efforts after the Civil Rights Act of 1866, said Atiba Ellis, professor of law at Case Western Reserve University School of Law. Traffic also raised concerns about how layoffs and instability at social media platforms like Twitter may leave them less prepared to tackle misinformation in 2024. While many of the same recycled claims around alleged fraud in the 2020 and 2022 elections are expected to resurface, experts say disinformation campaigns will likely be more sophisticated and granular in attempts to target specific groups of voters of color. And democracy is at stake, folks. These are non-monolithic groups. Disinformation is very specifically tailored to each of these communities and their fears. So we also need to be partnering with grassroots organizations in each of these communities to tailor our approaches. If we don't take the time to do this work, our democracy is at stake. Clara Jimenez Cruz from the Associated Press. David, I feel like the wrongdoers, the mischievous people out there who love AI, controversy, and cheating are so out in front in this race. I don't know. It really scared me, the headline here, because this is happening. And this time, these thieves of democracy, these lack of integrity people have just learned how to do it better.
Hey, Sharon, you're absolutely right. I mean, it used to be, let's say 20, 30 years ago, where the weekend before election day, African-American communities, Asian American communities, Latino communities, they might be blanketed with pamphlets or with papers stuck on car windshields saying, election day has been moved. It's no longer next Tuesday, it's the following Tuesday. Or if you vote and you happen to know somebody who's got an arrest warrant or you haven't paid your rent, then you'll be arrested. I mean, all sorts of nonsense. Well, now imagine this being delivered by Joe Biden's voice in terms of a phone call, and somebody who, and you get this phone call and you think, my God, that's President Biden telling me the election has been moved. And it's not, it's artificial intelligence, but that's how good the technology has become. The methods are, of course, the same: to try to frighten people, to frighten communities, and to get them not to vote on election day, to get them to think that they can vote somewhere else or that they shouldn't vote at all. And unfortunately, I think you're right, Sharon. I think the artificial intelligence, the people who are doing terrible things, they have outpaced our ability as a society to keep up with it.
Yeah, you're dead on, and there's this too, because I feel like in the past there's been a segment who disagrees, of course, with these people who are doing this and trying to impose their will and dictate to the rest of us. They're just stupid. They're targeting people who want to believe this stuff, don't have a clue, or ignorant. But at the end of the day, I feel like this stuff is so sophisticated now. Again, targeting, knowing what your sweet spot is, extramarital affairs, okay? Black men, don't trust. They're so sophisticated now that decent people, smart people, they can get caught up too. Am I wrong?
No, I think you're absolutely right. And again, the ability to churn out the stuff. I mean, whereas in the past it would take, you needed a printer and you needed, to go to the Kinko's or Xerox machine, whatever it was. Now it's literally just a couple of clicks to be able to do a lot of this stuff. And so it's so much easier and so much more sophisticated. And so as a result, you can target people by area code, you can target them by zip code, you can customize the message to literally millions of people at a time.
I don't know what can be done about this because this is my last comment on it, but I feel like before the universe balanced itself in some way, right? Let's say 2020, when someone had to exit the Oval Office after saying, don't vote early, mail in this and that. And of course, all these states reacted and changed laws. And now I see 45 in between indictments, David, he's doing a commercial saying, vote early. This is your friend, mail-in voting. So I don't know if there's anything that's going to rescue us. I sure hope so. Your thoughts?
I think the only thing that really can rescue us is to sort of improve our own sort of election system to make it easier for people to access the ballot. If that means more early voting, if that means voting electronically, voting online, and yes, with all the various confirmation systems that a society should expect. But we should be making it easier for people to cast their ballot as opposed to more difficult. Because if you do make it more difficult and it takes having to wait in line for 7 or 8 hours, or you feel like, oh my God, there's not gonna be a precinct near my house because they've taken the voting machines away. If it's already that difficult, then it also makes it more easy for somebody to find an excuse not to go. And that's when some of this false information can really be effective.
Absolutely right, my friend. Absolutely right. We'll see what transpires here, but buckle up.